Hello and welcome back to the When You're podcast, the podcast for when you're doing anything. Today we're talking about when you're trying to read a book. And I say trying to because I find myself more often than not trying to read than actually reading. Like I always try to make the time. I always try to find a good opportunity to pick up a book and start actually reading it. And it just doesn't happen. Now, more often than not, I will have a lot more time. I will spend a whole day in the library just looking at books and finding books that I think are interesting. Like finding a book is a lot more fun than actually sitting down and than actually sitting down and reading the book. Because you have so many options to choose from. There's so many things to look at. You walk around, you look around, you try to find something that just appeals to you and the things that you like, and it really depends. For me, I like fiction books more than maybe autobiographies, nonfiction. I mean, those stuff are great. That kind of material is great as well. Those other genres are really fun and cool, and I think they have a lot of interesting things in there. It's just for me, I just gravitate toward more like a fantasy, science fiction kind of a world. I'm not really big on, reading up on the latest celebrity memoirs or, I'm just not really. That's not the kind of books that I usually go for. But maybe they should be, because every time I try to find a fiction book, I end up not reading it, or I try to read it, I read a few pages, and then I put it down, and then I completely forget about it. It's just, it's a whole nightmare. But the go-to spot every single time is Barnes & Noble's. And I don't go there often, right? If you go to Barnes & Noble's every once in a while and get a new book, that's, you go there looking for a book. You go there, you get one book, and then that's it. I go there every now and then, so it's not like I live near one. I mean, I used to, and it was awesome. I mean, it was amazing. But then they got rid of it and replaced it with a sporting goods store. And now that sporting goods store is closed down. And then they replaced it with the gym. And that gym is, I don't know anybody who goes to that gym, but apparently it's still around. So, I mean, it was just a big disappointment. I definitely should have taken that. I definitely should have done more with it than I did. But anyways, Barnes & Noble's is the 100% go-to spot for books. Now, there are a bunch of other bookstores that I'm sure people are aware of, but for me, Barnes & Noble's has always been the spot. It's always been the hangout. That's the go-to spot for all things books. And honestly, if it was between, having to go to maybe a, how there are those, I mean, obviously you have libraries and you have other stores, but if it was between downloading a bunch of, my bad, going to a very popular and famous bookstore or going to Barnes & Noble's, I definitely choose Barnes & Noble's every time. They just have a feel to it that I really enjoy. I can't really, if you know the feeling of it just feels like a home in there. It just feels very homey. They got that Starbucks and you can kind of smell the coffee. It's got a good feel to it. I definitely enjoy that spot. And because I only go there every so often, whenever I go there, I find 3-4 books, and then I read one book or try to read one book, and then all of a sudden I put it down and I can't read it. I don't read it anymore, and I want to get better at it. That's what this is all about. I want to get better at it, and I want to do better. But I find myself, because of the digital age, I find myself gravitating more to podcasts and audiobooks. Dude, let me tell you something about audiobooks. Audiobooks are the greatest thing in the world because they tell the story, hopefully, because they always have actors. They'll pay actors to act out the story. So they just read the pages and they do it in in a very, what's the, they just act out every single word from it. forget the exact term for it. Maybe I'm saying it right, but I feel like there's another word for it. But they read it in a dramatized version, or in a dramatized way that I really enjoy, that just like brings the story to life. So audiobooks are definitely like more of my go-to, and I feel I'm more of an auditory learner anyway, because like if you tell me to do something, I'll remember it. I often find myself like, if you tell me something or if you say something to me, I'll remember it a lot more than like if you were to write it down, or if you were to like some people are very visual learners. So if you like color code a bunch of their notes or whatnot, like they'll be, I mean, that works for me too, but I'm very auditory. Long story short, I think audiobooks are a great spot. So if you're feeling like, hey, maybe I should, there's a book I want to read, maybe, or there's a book that you find interesting and you're like, but I don't really have a lot of time to read, or whenever I try to read it on my own, I end up not fitting it into my schedule. So like, I find that maybe when you're driving or you're in the car, whenever you have like a little bit of, maybe you're doing some household chores, like maybe you're doing your laundry, or maybe you're sweeping your room, or you know, just doing whatever, you can take that little bit of extra time to just put on the audiobook, and you can like listen to the story if you think it's interesting, you know. Now, I would never read a book on a Kindle. Never. I have never read a book on like a Kindle, like the thing for books. It's the little tablet that they have for books. I like having a book in my hands. I will 10,000% always want a book more than that Kindle. Like it just doesn't feel right, dude. There's something so wrong about holding that tablet and just swiping. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. What feels right is having the pages in your hands, and then you just flip through the pages, dude. It just feels so much better, especially if you get that good crisp. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody who's ever read like that one good book, or had that like old book or whatever, and you opened it up and you just felt you heard the creases. It's like a nice little crisp. It's just, I can't even recreate it. It's so beautiful. It's just such an amazing sound. But that's how you know you have a good book on your hands. Or like a journal. You know, they have the same kind of like fresh feel to it, and textbooks as well. If you ever have like one of those old textbooks from like high school or whatever, or what, you know what I'm talking about, like the hardcovers, and then you open it up, it has like a little bit of a crisp to it. Oh, the best thing. And then when you flip through the pages, it keeps on. Oh, dude, it's awesome. But you know, for all my talk about me not reading on a Kindle, like on the tablet, I find myself reading a lot more on my phone. Not like actual books and stuff, but like I'll scroll through I'll scroll through like Instagram, and you know how every now and then they'll be like, check out the celebrity gossip or whatever, and they have like a little article, or like there'll be like some Hollywood gossip or like something on there that I'm like, all right, I don't really care all that much, but let me just see what it is they're talking about. So I'll go to the article link, and then I'll read that. You know, it's not a book, but I find myself reading on my phone a lot more. Or like on Twitter, they'll have like articles and stuff about they'll put threads about a bunch of different stuff on there depending on the circumstances. And I'll read a lot more on that. You know, just updates on like news events and like kind of what's going on in the world right now. Right now, everybody's constantly talking about the submarine thing that's sinking down, and they have until like the morning this podcast goes out. The morning this podcast goes out, they have until that moment to revive, to save them, to save those people, and you know, so hopefully all goes well. And there's another incident in another spot. I completely forget. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking on it right now. But there's a shipwreck of immigrants, of a bunch of people are like in a sinking boat out there, and it's also a tragedy. But that's what people are talking about, and they're also talking about Zendaya's new show, The Challenger, and how she's supposedly she's getting she in a threesome in that one, and that one's wild. That one is wild. But to me, I always felt like there are certain sports that like are not sexy. And tennis was definitely one of them. Like, when was the last tennis scandal you ever heard of? Like, and I mean like sex scandal. Like, golfing had Tiger Woods, right? Basketball, football, even baseball got it. You know what I'm saying? The tennis, never heard about tennis sex scandal. Maybe I'm just not into that deep into the tennis world. Maybe I'm wrong, but for me, every time I've ever seen it, I was always kind of like, hey, that's not really the go-to sport. But anyways, that's what people are talking about, and I read that on my phone a lot more than I do an actual book. And if I spent the time to actually read a book instead of reading on my phone, maybe I would get somewhere, but obviously not. And my problem is, I always read those articles when I'm laying in my bed at night. It's like I should be asleep. I should put my phone down and close my eyes, but like my mind just starts wandering all to different places. I start watching Drain videos. You ever watch Post 10? Great guy, great video. Shout out to you, Post 10, on YouTube. Go check it out. If you're listening to this at like 1 a.m., listen to the rest of this, and then at 2 a.m. go watch Post 10. I promise you will not regret it. It's some of the best videos I've ever watched. I promise you. And I could only watch them, it's not like a 12 p.m. kind of a watch. You have to wait until it's nighttime and you're completely exhausted, and then you can watch it. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those. But I think what it is that I just like the quiet time. And then during the quiet time, maybe I could read. But then I'd have to have all my lights on. I'd have to have like direct... I'd have to actually read, It's not like on my phone where the light just shines in my face and I can read the words right there on the screen, So I think that's my problem, is that like during quiet time I will read, but in that quiet time is like nighttime, and I don't want to turn on the lights, and I don't want to read the book then and there. So it's always a hassle. But I think that if I did find the quiet time to like actually be in silence, I could, and this is probably what's going to help me the most. I find a book, right? Maybe I find like an audio book, and then I get an actual real book of the same book, and then I listen to it, the audio book, and read along. That's probably the best thing that'll help me. That is without a doubt the one thing that'll probably help me in my whole life, because I remember in school, we used to do that. We used to listen and read along, so I wouldn't have to like read out loud. I could just like follow the words perfectly. And that way I retain the information a lot better, because other people are actually like out loud reading it and I'm just following along. It's like when actors do a table read. So like the whole cast will just get together and they'll just read the script together. Now, when you're an actor, that's good for you, because then you're trying to figure out how people's different... Obviously, you get your dialogue, but obviously it's like, okay, where do I fit into the whole scenario? What's everybody's emotion? What's everybody feeling? And in this particular case, they've already done all that. They've already got all the words down. They got the emotion, they got the feeling to it. They have the intensity, they have the dramatization on there. Everything is perfectly placed, in the audiobook. So all I have to do is listen to it and then have the book in front of me and then read along. That way I can, because I'm an auditory learner, I don't have to just speak out the words out loud to myself. I can just listen to somebody else do it and stay quiet. And that way I can get some, I can stay at peace and a little bit of quiet while also gaining some stuff from it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like when you're doing something and then you have your TV on in the background, so that way you don't feel so lonely, kind of a deal. Because like if it's just silence around me and I'm reading, I'll feel like I might get tired and go to sleep, or just like close the book completely and just be like, oh, whatever, let me get on my phone and just put something on. But it won't work. So if I have the audiobook playing and I listen to it and I read along, I'll probably get a lot more done than not. But in school we used to do that a bunch. And because we did that in school, I don't know, I just felt like okay, I'm not going to say we did that a bunch. I'm saying that we did that on like maybe one or two books. And I can distinctly remember we read this book called The Outsiders, The Outsiders, with Ponyboy and Soda. You know, if you haven't watched the movie, if you haven't read the book or watched the movie, don't, spoilers for it. But anyways, that book was probably the best reading experience, like learning experience I ever had in my life, because we would listen to the audio, we would read the book along in the book, and then I remember they would let us take our books home with us, like they would give everybody their own individual book, and I remember I went home and I read that entire book, and I remember going back to class acting like I didn't know anything that happened in the book. So that way nobody else would so that way I could like see everybody else's reactions. It was so crazy. That book was so good. It was insanely good. And it was just like, I never had that kind of experience reading another book again. Or like having like a bunch of people, like a book club, That would be cool, a book club. That way everybody could like read together, I guess, or you can come back and converse about it. But long story short, in school they used that. Oh, and they used to make us popcorn read. They used to make us popcorn read. If you ever, popcorn reading is essentially, I mean, if you don't know it, you don't know it, but whatever. Popcorn reading is like, I read a sentence and then I go to the next person and they popcorn read and they popcorn read. Now sometimes you get to choose them and sometimes it's just like whoever you're next to, you know what I mean? So like if I'm sitting next to Brittany or whoever, she'll do the next one, and then that person, the person next to her, will do the next one, so on and so forth. Or maybe it might be in alphabetical order on the list or whatever. Or the teacher will just call on you to read if you haven't read or volunteered to read. So I remember when popcorn reading, some people would would have to read from the pages, and they would suck at reading. I mean, on like they were probably at a second grade reading level. I mean, they would just stutter on every single word. They were just like, and then she said, walk. Like, it was just like completely monotone and just like, they were just saying words. They weren't actually like fully comprehending the material. So I would have to like figure out, okay, which paragraph would I get on? Like when they call on me or whenever I come up to read my part, I would already be ahead of everybody. I wouldn't pay attention to any other thing, and I would just read my part, and then I'd be like, okay, this is how I'm going to say it. So that way, right then and there, I didn't have to like stutter, or like when I get to the end of the sentence, I have to go to the next, to the left to read the next bit. I already knew what I was going to say. I already knew the flow of the paragraph or whatever, or the page or whatever I was going to read. And that's how I got really good at reading. I was like, I never want to be that person who's like slow. I only want to be like a good reader, like an efficient reader. I just want to get it over with, you know what I mean? So I became really good at that. But other than that, when you're trying to read a book, it's like that. You read and you read and you read, and then out of nowhere, you're just like, all right, let me stop. You just stop immediately. You know what I mean? You just give up. You're just like, I'm done with the book for right now, and then we'll come back to it later or something like that. But they also tell you that it's kind of difficult to. Okay. If you rent a library book, this is probably the best thing for you. If you like going to the library, if you have a library card and you're just like, let me rent a book and let me see what it's about. You rent the book, and then you end up reading like maybe the first two chapters, or first three chapters, and the first three chapters don't immediately like hold you in. You stop reading the book. Like you don't go any deeper into the book. People who can do that are great, You know what I mean? Like because they give up. They're like, you didn't hook me in. Like the book's not good for me. And those people I really admire, because for me, I'll read and read and read and read and read, or like I'll just read a small bit of it and then I'll put it away and then like I'll come back to it later. And because you rent it, it's like you have to give it back. So you have to like maybe put a little investment into it, or you kind of have to what's the word? You'd have to give it a shot, give it a lot more chances, because there's a deadline of when you have to like give it back. Does that make sense? So you read the book, and if it doesn't immediately hook you, you stop. You stop it completely. You don't go any further into it, because otherwise you're just gonna waste time. You know, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to do that. And for me, that's probably where I'm at. That's probably what's gonna happen for me, is that I'm gonna get a book. That's what I'm going to start doing from now on. Just so that way I can like read books that I like, or maybe that are good for me. But like you pick up a book, you read it, and if it doesn't hook you within the first 2 or 3 chapters, then dude, you just got to put it away and just be like, yeah, I picked a bad book. You know, don't let your ego be like, no, I choose good books, so I got to read this thing all the way through. Like, no, you can make a bad choice. And you have made bad choices. The book sucks, or it's just not to your liking. You know, it's not typically something that you like. Because all books are, you know, if they get published, hopefully they're good, right? Isn't that? Yeah, I don't know. But what happens? Like if you buy a book, you read, and then it's not as good as you thought it would be. What then? I guess you could just return the book. But you would have to read the book. I guess it all depends, right? Obviously, it depends on returning it. But I think if you read and it's not as good as you thought it would be, for me, I just like to hold on to the book because I already paid the money for it, and I don't feel like going back to the Barnes and Noble and being like, yeah, man, this book was trash. I'm sorry I ever got it. It's different if you rent, you know, if you get a library book, you rent it. That's probably the better route to go, especially for that method. Just to see if you like it. You know, there can also be, you could also read a really good book. Like there are a couple of good books that I've read where like you read it and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But then you like put it down and you put it away. And you're just like, let me come back to it later. I promise I'll come back to it later. And then you just never come back to it. Like I tried reading, you know what I mean? When you're trying to read, you get a good book, right? But then something, one way or another, just something comes up where it just like makes you put the book down. Now, some people are like, if it's good, they just keep on reading and reading and reading. And I felt that feeling before, and I want to feel that feeling again. But it's just like, you know, some other stuff takes priority. Some other things just get in the way, you know, and there's other stimulus. There are other things that stimulate me a lot more than, you know, than that sort of a thing. One of them is making this podcast, making videos and stuff, editing, you know, obviously keeping up with like some of my favorite shows and whatnot, right? But like, exercise and doing other stuff, but those are what take priority 9 out of 10 times, right? For me, at least, where it's like if I devoted some of the time to the book, I would have maybe a bunch of good books that I have read and that I know are good, but I don't. So it becomes really difficult, and that's why they get pushed to the side, and then I completely forget about them, and then I'm like, man, what happened? Why didn't I read this book? And then I'm like, well, that's what happens. And then isn't that, you read the book, it sucks after like you find a book, you think it's going to be good, you buy the book, right? You buy the book, you take it home, and then you put it down for a while, then you try to read it, and then it's not as good as you thought it was, right? But then like you'd have to get a whole nother book, and it's just it's a never ending process of like, man, this book sucked. I have to go back and return it and then get another book that is also probably going to suck. And then you're just like, it's a never ending cycle of like, I'm trying to read, but then nothing ever appeals to me, or I put it away, or I don't find the time, or I can't really connect to it as much as I thought I did, or it's good, but then something else came up, and then, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's this endless cycle of like, just I'm not going to say it's a big hassle, but just a little bit of a hassle to like get that perfect book. Sometimes I just wish that like there was something to tell me that like, this is a book for you. This is definitely what you need. This is something that appeals to what helps you the most. And that's why they have like classical books that everybody can appreciate, everybody can like. You know what I mean? And if you don't have if you don't read classic books, then you'll never know like exactly where your range is, I guess, or like where you fit into all of it. Because there's certain, there are definitely some good classic books, like The Great Gatsby, Fight Club is a good book. There are books like that. They're quote unquote classics, or good books, and you can kind of gauge where you fit into there. Do I like the book? Do I not? What kind of style fits me the best? What kind of genre do I really appeal, or like that do I enjoy a lot more of? And then you figure out from there. And you also get like books to help you in your life. Books that you can read over and over and over and over and over again. These happen to be self-help books, so there are a lot of good self-help books out there. And those ones have all kinds of gems and lessons in there that can apply to any stage of your life. So there might be something in the book now that really resonates with you that you read, and then later on down the road, and another part of the book that maybe you're kind of like, I'm good on that. That doesn't really bother me that much, or I don't really need that right now. And then maybe a couple years down the line, you're like, actually, that one really appeals to me now, or that fits what I'm going through in my life today. You know what I mean? So there's always a chance to like reread and reread and reread. And you kind of like, oh, snap. I remember I got this book a while back, and now it helps me over and over and over again. And like I said, there's always classic books. And to get back in the swing of things, I think the best thing to do is to like maybe find children's books. Like little like children's chapter books. Like The Magic Tree House. Like that's a chapter book, and those are fairly small. So you can get through that book in no time. Just to pick something up, just to read. You know what I'm saying? So when you're trying to read, maybe start off basic, start at the bottom at children's level, and then work your way up to maybe more in-depth and longer books, because if you start with a huge, long book, you're probably not going to get through it. Or you can get through it, but then you're kind of like, I shouldn't, you don't read it all the way, or you're like, I gave it a shot, and then I kept reading and reading and reading, and then I just stopped. You know what I mean? That happens more often than not. This is why comic books are good. This is why comic books are such a huge staple for readers, because they always grip you with action, colorful characters, and really great stuff, And if you read the comics, I won't say I've personally read the comics, like a bunch of like superhero comics, but reading comic books are probably that source material is just for fun, and you kind of already get an idea of who they are, or like what their abilities are, or you just get immersed into this world of like, if you read X-Book comic books or Iron Man comic books or Spider-Man comic books, right? You just get into the world and into the character, and then if they put it on screen, cool. But that's why comic books are probably really good, and mangas. The books, the manga books. Yeah. They tell some pretty great stories in there, and then they have the anime show, so you can watch it on there. So at the end of the day, when you're trying to read a book, read an actual book, not a Kindle. Maybe find an audiobook, real book matchup, so that way you can like listen to it and read at the same time. And just try not reading on the phone as much, and I'm mostly talking to myself here, but if this helps you out as well, shout out to you. I hope you read that book that you've been wanting to read, but you've been postponing for a while. You do you, okay? And don't let anybody on like any social media sites who like go into deep book reviews tell you that the book that you like sucks, or tell you or maybe they gas up your book and they tell you it's the most amazing book. All right, you gotta do you. You gotta find what works for you. Okay, so thank you guys so much for listening. I'll catch you guys all next time, and go read those books. All right, take care. Bye.